And I know most moms, the goal is not to try and control everything. Most of us just want to feel empowered and confident and informed. And you want to walk out of birth feeling like that was a great experience, not necessarily because everything went perfect and according to plan, but because you understood your options and you had a couple of things that you could lean on, including your knowledge, when things went perhaps not exactly according to that plan.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started.
Birth plans are interesting because almost every mom knows that she needs one or she should have one, or it's this discussion about what's going to end up on the birth plan. But I think very few people show you how to actually create one that's going to help you and be there for you during the labor process. Now, let me give you an example. You are late night scrolling. You're learning about the different options that you might have in birth. Maybe you've even looked into some different birth plan options and you pull up something that has a bunch of checklists and you're like, oh my gosh, this sounds great. Like freedom of movement. And I want the ability to have aromatherapy in my room. And I want dim lights and no epidural and delayed cord clamping and immediate skin to skin. And some of this is just like, yes, I want all of these things, right? And a lot of them have really long checklists. So it's got all kinds of things on there. And you're thinking, yes, this looks really good. I want to include all of this. This sounds like it could be my ideal birth. But then labor actually begins and things begin happening and possibly begin to change. And then suddenly there's decisions that need to be made that don't necessarily follow the ideal checklist. For example, your provider comes and says, it looks like your contractions are slowing. Maybe we need to start some Pitocin. Or we're noticing that your baby's heart rate has dipped on these last two contractions, so we need to make XYZ of a change. And then suddenly that birth plan that you loved, that you created, that you thought was just going to be exactly what happened, doesn't quite feel like it applies to your current situation. And this is the part where maybe some of that regret or disappointment shows up. This is the part that I hear from moms. I didn't know about all of these other options. I didn't know how to set this up the right way. And that's just because you didn't have somebody show you the framework or the things that matter most or that shouldn't be on the birth plan that can help support you during the actual birth of your baby. And I know most moms, the goal is not to try and control everything. Most of us just want to feel empowered and confident and informed. And you want to walk out of birth feeling like that was a great experience, not necessarily because everything went perfect and according to plan, but because you understood your options and you had a couple of things that you could lean on, including your knowledge, when things went perhaps not exactly according to that plan. So today, I thought it would be fun to walk you through some of the biggest birth plan mistakes that I see all the time and exactly what to do instead so that your birth plan actually works for you. Now, let's talk about why birth plans don't tend to work when we are just talking about a plan itself. So number one, like I said, when you go online and you're looking for plans, there's a lot of checklists. And I have seen moms print out 4, 5, 6 pages of literal checklists. And it's just like, yes, I want all the things. And that is great. But when you are handing that to a labor and delivery ward, particularly if they are busy, then they are not going to have time to flip through that and flip back and forth through it. And wait, is she getting all the things that she wants? It just is a little too much for anybody to really want to stop and go through all the details. The other thing is, And this is nothing against nurses, but when you bring in something like that, the conversation that happens at the nurse station may not be the best. Like, oh, like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I'm already busy and whatever. And then it becomes a topic of conversation where it's like irritating instead of, oh, look at this cute birth plan. And here's all the stuff on there. And it's one page and it's nice and neat and orderly. And we're going to tape it right here. Right. So that's the idea. It's not just a bunch of checklists. Now, if your hospital hands you, if you're going to a hospital and they hand you a birth plan and it's a booklet or something that's stapled together and it does have a checklist, that is something that you want to make sure to use. Now, I'm going to tell you to create a separate birth plan as well, and you're going to make several copies. We'll get into that in a minute. You're going to create that as well. But if this is something that they're providing, then it's something that they're very familiar with. They're going to know, they look at this form all day, every day, these labor and delivery nurses. And so they know exactly where to flip, what they're looking for, and what to put on your board so that you make sure to get exactly what you want or desire as far as the birth plan goes. So kind of getting back to the topic that I wanted to touch on here is birth is not a script. And so the birth plan really isn't a script of like, this is exactly how birth needs to play out. It's information that we can use to make decisions in real time and things that are most important to us. Let me give you an example. So a lot of things that we see on birth plans are like no epidural, no Pitocin, no interventions, intermittent monitoring, delayed cord clamping, right? All of these things that sound really good for this ideal birth that moms might be interested in doing. That's a lot of what we see on the birth plan. But let me give you an example scenario. So let's say that for some reason, labor stalls out, and P.S., that can be very normal just for moms that are listening. However, if you're doing that in a hospital setting and labor is happening for whatever reason, then all of a sudden it looks like it's stalling out. So contractions are coming longer, stronger, closer together. But then for whatever reason, they space out or you don't have one for a little bit of time. All of a sudden it's like, hey, I noticed that your contractions spaced out. It looks like we think the best thing to do here is to have you start Pitocin. And you're like, whoa, wait, that wasn't part of my birth plan. Like, what do I do here, right? And this is kind of where that regret can come in, where you're like, oh, shoot, all of a sudden, I don't feel like I'm part of this plan. I feel like birth is kind of happening to me. So yes, you can put no Pitocin on your birth plan, but what's really important is that you understand the why behind it and what it's used for and what your options are. So if you understand what Pitocin does, you take a little bit of time to learn that. For example, Pitocin is the synthetic form of oxytocin. Oxytocin is the hormone that your body makes, that it makes contractions. So when you go into labor, your body produces oxytocin, which produces contractions. And that is what brings your baby into this world, or part of it. And so when it looks like your contractions aren't doing what they need them to do, or they're stalling out for whatever reason, which again can be normal, they can come back, but for the sake of this conversation, and they say, it looks like we need to get contractions going again, let's do Pitocin, then you need to understand what Pitocin is. So it's synthetic, and the way that it reacts and your body reacts is going to be different than oxytocin contractions, where oxytocin contractions generally kind of work in more of like an ebb and a flow. So they kind of go up slowly and they build and they get to a peak and a crest, and then it falls back down until it finally releases. Pitocin is much more like, okay, the Pitocin drip is happening and now we have a contraction and we go straight up and then we hold that contraction for 30 seconds, 45, a minute, whatever it is, and then it drops. So that's a very different contraction. So you need to understand like the physical, what's going to be happening. The other part of that is what kind of effect does it have on my baby? So Pitocin is going to be different than oxytocin, and babies, including mine with my first birth, my baby couldn't handle the Pitocin. So he went into distress over trying to kick up the Pitocin. And that was a whole thing. That doesn't always happen, but obviously, even in my case, that was the situation. So that's something to know. Another thing is maybe you just ask when it's recommended, right? And that's a conversation to have with your provider beforehand. But yeah, when do you recommend Pitocin? Like if I have a natural stall during labor, you can bring this up, right? If my body relaxes and just gives me a break for a little bit during labor, are you concerned? Do we need to use it during that time? Are there other natural methods, P.S., yes, there are, that we can try before utilizing this drug? And then maybe like what alternatives, right? And so questions that you can ask your provider are like, what would we try before we tried Pitocin? How long would you wait before recommending it? And what signs tell us that we kind of need to change course? And then you guys can kind of have that conversation beforehand. And so when you have no Pitocin on your birth plan, you know why you have it there. You have your why behind it. And then if it's recommended during that course of labor, you can choose to utilize it or try some of your other tools or say no. So that is the important part behind the birth plan. The birth plan is great because it's a quick snapshot for your provider. Your job is to understand the whys behind the information that you're putting on there. And all of that's helping make sure that you feel still in control and confident and empowered. So you feel like you're making those informed decisions throughout the labor process. Now, that kind of leads into birth plan mistake number 2, which is not using the birth plan as a communication tool. Now, this is a big thing that I talk to moms about a lot. I truly believe in this. The birth plan is great. You can have all your best information on there and your ideal birth ready to go, but it really should be a jumping off point for you to have a conversation with your provider. So one of the ways, simple ways that I tell moms that they can do this is to kind of like close your eyes, take a deep breath, walk yourself from that first contraction to the birth of your baby. Where are you? What does it look like? What does it feel like? Who is there with you? Who's supporting you? What kind of conversations are you having with your provider? Are you at the hospital? Are you at home? Are you in your own clothes? Are you in a birth gown? Are you hooked up to anything? Do you have people hands-on supporting you? What does your birth look like? So that's something for you to do. Kind of use that visualization to decide what birth looks like and feels like to you, and then kind of create a birth plan around that. So let me just say, a birth map shouldn't be something that you get to the hospital and you hand over to the nurse, and that's the first time anybody's seeing or hearing or talking about it. That is after you've had several conversations with your provider. You know what to expect from your provider and what to expect from the hospital. This is a great thing to take with you to your birthplace tour and ask questions. How do you guys feel about intermittent monitoring? How do you handle when somebody doesn't want an IV? What do you think about wearing our own clothes during labor, or if I want to eat during labor? Tell me a little about that. And that'll give you an idea of what is going to be most important to include on the birth plan based off of what is most important to you and what can kind of get left to the side. And I say that because birth plans should not be a lot of fluff. These are one page. I often like to choose the visual birth plans, but one page, maybe a picture of you and your partner, including any support people that you have, maybe a quick sentence about why this birth is so exciting and you're so excited to meet, name of your baby, and all of that stuff. And then it immediately goes into, here are our preferences, understanding that if things change, we can be flexible, but these are the things that we desire most, or however you want to put it. And then it goes from early labor to active transition to pushing to postpartum. So it really is just labor, immediate postpartum, and the rest, right? And so kind of in the order that things would happen. So if you know it's really important for you, you do not want to be poked with any needles, no IV at the top, right? You want to wear your own clothes, make sure it's on there. Now, if this is stuff that they already, like intermittent monitoring, they're like, we offer that to everybody. Guess what? If it's the hospital that you're going to, it doesn't need to be on the birth plan. If you're concerned at all that there's going to be a transfer and the new location, that's not the case, then put it on the birth plan if that's very important to you. You know, no vaginal exams, able to walk during labor, able to eat during labor. If those are any of those are things that happen normally there, same with the postpartum, immediate cord clamping, breastfeeding, skin to skin, then you don't have to include all that. That way you're getting the most important things that are important to you and that they don't normally do, so that those are the highlights. And that's the idea behind the birth plan. But as you look over that birth plan, it's encouraging you to ask those questions with your provider ahead of time. Like, hey, what's your typical approach to inductions? And what do you do when labor slows down? And what are your thoughts on intermittent monitoring? All of that is really conversational, and then it can get solidified and you take it with you to your birth. And it's also to help you learn what your provider thinks about certain things before you go into labor. So separate conversation, if you and your provider are not on the same page here when you present ideas from your birth plan or really just questions about the ideas from your birth plan, and that's popping little red flags, go try another provider. Go seek another provider, ask the same questions, and see how you feel. It should be supportive all along the way. So use the birth plan to kind of test that out. And as I keep saying birth plan, within the My Essential Birth course, this is really important to me. We talk about it as a birth map. Now, I'm saying birth plan because I know that, 99% of you hear birth plan. And so that's, just the term that I'm going to use here. But I love the term birth map and using a birth map because there are several ways to get to that end destination, whatever that is for you. And we can always say, a healthy mom, baby, and all that. That's the bare minimum. So whatever your end destination looks like, and that can be, hospital, unmedicated, home, whatever. And these people with me and this experience and all of that. So it's really, the idea is that it can flow and change directions and still end up being exactly what you want it to be and how you feel when it's all said and done. So I actually have a download for you guys. It is within the show notes here, and it is a birth map. It's kind of like a drag and drop kind of done for you. It gives you an opportunity to put your picture on there. You just drag and drop all the stuff that is important to you and its little visuals, and you can bring that with you. But again, don't just use it for that. Okay, birth plan mistake number 3, preparing only for that ideal scenario. Now, I feel like I've kind of hit on that a couple of times, but I feel like a lot of birth plans only focus on that perfect version of labor, and that can be a little frustrating when it's not exactly like that, whether that's spontaneous labor or a smooth progression or the baby arrives quickly, whatever the idea is behind it, it can definitely take those different turns like that birth map. So maybe you have a longer labor, maybe there's a bunch of position changes or extra monitoring. And the moms who tend to feel the most confident during birth are really, like I said, the ones who understand their options ahead of time and have a say throughout the experience, which really has to do with setting up your birth team appropriately. But this is certainly part of it. And I think too, when you understand kind of the landscape of birth and that it can change and what your options are, then you're not thrown off by those little curves. And that's what I want for all of you, that you can ebb and flow with your labor as labor does and still feel like I am not only a part of this, but I'm in control of the experience throughout and the decision making. So here's what a birth plan should actually do. A birth plan should help your provider, your care team, really understand what matters to you. Now, examples of helpful things to include, kind of like I said, were some, who's going to be there with me, why this birth is important to us, or the way that we've set this up is important to us, and we're so excited to meet our baby. But it also needs to include those preferences for pain management, like I said, support people involved, any immediate newborn care preferences, and it should flow in that order of how it's going to happen when you come into your birthplace. And obviously, if you are a mom that's giving birth out of the hospital, then you should have a birth plan in the event of transfer. And if you're like, nope, I don't want to create that because I don't want my mind to go there. I want to focus on the birth that I have in front of me. That's fair. I'm going to push you to create it anyways, because you never know what a transfer could be for. It doesn't have to mean that it's this big emergency or anything like that. And transfers can happen both during labor and postpartum for both mom and or baby. So it is really important that you know which hospital you be transferring to. I recommend that you go and do a quick hospital tour there, and then you just create that birth plan and tuck it away. It actually will create more peace of mind. And then if you need to utilize it, you're like, oh, I have it right here with my several copies, because they can get lost and you don't want that to happen. So you tuck a couple copies in your bag, you hand one to the nurse, you hand one to the next nurse, you put one on the bulletin board, you have a couple more in your bag. And that way you just, peace of mind, you don't have to worry about it. So if it feels overwhelming, it shouldn't. And so that's why I have that birth map tool for you. We've had this for a nice long time now. Moms love it. So I'm definitely going to link to that in the show notes. So if you guys don't know where to get the show notes, you head to myessentialbirth.com/podcast. You click on whatever episode you're listening to. And when you scroll down to the bottom, all the links are in the bottom. So we have freebies and giveaways and discount codes, and all that stuff is going to be right there. And so this is one of the freebies that you can just download real quick and utilize for yourself. And I want you to remember, birth does not have to unfold perfectly for you to walk away feeling good about your experience. What matters most is that you felt informed, that you understood your options, and that you're part of the decision-making throughout the process. You definitely deserve to go into your birth feeling confident, prepared, and empowered. And so I hope that this episode was helpful and that you utilize that birth map so that you can use that to talk to your provider and to feel really good about going into your birth.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.